The 3-day lecture is supposed to conclude today, but fortunately we are getting one more day. Earlier I thought for 4 days Meghadoota should go on, but for some reason it was only curtailed for 3 days. But I came to know about some inconvenience for tomorrow's speakers issues, and that's why tomorrow is also given to Meghadoota, and I am very happy that Shashi can very leisurely, comfortably complete the Purva Megham today and go to Uttara Megham tomorrow. Yesterday, he introduced the very poem itself, starting from the words of Yaksha and from the Ramagiri, moving on to Mala, one more place, and going to Reva, that is Narmada river, and then by the way passing through the Amarkantak or Amrakuta, and then near Ujjaini, after passing Vidisha. All these beautiful path of Megha has been traced very well by him. And tomorrow he'll be speaking on the city of Alaka, the Yakshi there, the beloved of Yaksha, and then his message and the conclusion of the poem. Today we'll be having complete, detailed analysis of Ujjain, supposed to be the birthplace of Kalidasa, and then we'll be passing on to Himalayas, the most cherished place of Kalidasa. Kalidasa loved Himalaya very much, and Indian culture cannot be thought of anything else apart from Himalaya, and that is the greatness of Himalaya, and it has been immortalized by Kalidasa in 2 of his epics and even in 2 of his writings, that is one in Meghadoota, other in Kumarasambhavam, and in other works too, here and there he mentions. And so please enjoy these things, and once again have a hearty welcome to Shri Shashikiran for delivering this talk. Thank you.
Om Shanta Prithvi Shivamantariksam Dyaurno Devya Bhajanno Astu Shiva Adishah Pradisha Uddisho Naapo Vidyutah Paripantu Sarvatah Shantish Shantihi Namastunga Shiraschumbi Chandra Chamara Charave Trailokya Nagararambha Mulastambhaya Shambhave Kalidasa Giram Saram Kalidasa Saraswati Chaturmukhothava Sakshad Vidurnanyetu Madrishaha. Sarvebhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to all of you to this day's lecture on Kavikula Guru Kalidasa's Meghadoota. Dr. Ganesh called it a convenience, or because the lecture is being extended to one more day. I won't be so sure whether it will be a convenience to all of you. So it is because of the inconvenience on the part of tomorrow's speakers that I am asked to continue tomorrow also. So I request you all to please bear with me for one more day. And yesterday we had stopped at a junction where the cloud is about to enter the city of Ujjaini, and here we see in the description of Ujjaini almost all the verses. They are not just one of the finest verses in the Meghadoota, that is the Khandakavya Meghadoota. They form one of the best set of verses in the entire range of Sanskrit literature. So if a person who is unfamiliar with Sanskrit literature, if he wants to understand how Sanskrit poetry works, what are the poetic conventions, how do Sanskrit poets go about employing figures of speech in their poetry, how do they handle meter, and what about their erudition, what about their knowledge of various shastras. So in order to understand all of that, if you want to have one set of verses, you can choose this description of Ujjaini from Kalidasa's Meghadoota. It is fine poetry. So while the cloud is about to enter the city of Ujjaini, on its way, on the outskirts of the city, it encounters one river by name Nirvindhya, which is seen as a Virahini Naika. The river is almost waiting for the cloud to get united with her. And she is seen making all sorts of vibhamas and bibbokas that Kalidasa says are the first expressions of love of all women. That is what Kalidasa says. In a very beautiful Arthantaranyasa, he says, Strinam adyam pranaya vachanam vibhramo hi priyeshu. The first expressions of love expressed by all women are the vibhramas or amorous gestures of various sorts that they make. And in the description of the Virahini Naika, that is the river, we see a phrase employed by Kalidasa. It is a very loaded phrase, and it is very typical of him to pen such phrases. He says, describing the river, Vichikshobhas tanita vihaga shreni kanchi gunayaha. That is, the river Nirvindhya has for her waistband, that is the Mekhala or the Kanchi Dama, a circle of birds that are chirping very loudly because of coming into contact with turbulent waves. The whole of this idea is encapsulated by Kalidasa in a single phrase. Vichikshobhas tanita vihaga shreni kanchi gunayaha. If we are to break it down and understand, Vichi is a wave, Kshobha is the turbulence of the waves, Stanita vihaga shreni, that is a circle of birds that are chirping loudly, Kanchi gunayaha. The birds which are of this sort, they form the Mekhala or the Kanchi Dama of the river. And it is such a picturesque phrase. We can almost, see the river which is circled by those birds. And like I have been repeatedly mentioning, Kalidasa infuses Chetanatva into everything he wishes to describe. So the river is described as a Virahini Naika here. He describes it as Veni Bhuta Pratanu Salila Ta Matitasya Sindhu Panduchaya Tataruha Tarubhramshibhir Jirna Paranaihi. So how is the river? Her water is almost dried up, and it is flowing as a thin single stream. And it is because of this she is seen as an Ekaveni Dhara, which is a sign of Viraha. And the trees that were present all around the river, on the banks of the river, they had shedded their leaves. And those dried up leaves, which were strewn across all over the bank, they represent her paleness. So a woman who is waiting, who is pining for her beloved to come to her, is all pale. She has grown very pale, and the dried up leaves on her banks of the river represent her paleness. And after parting with this Nirvindhya river, the cloud then moves on to the city of Ujjaini, and on its way it is greeted, as it were, by fumes of smoke, by circles of smoke or fumes that are emanating from windows of many buildings that are there of Avanti. And even before that, Kalidasa describes the country of Avanti, the Avanti Desha, and he writes a very memorable verse which is also important in the context of the history of India. He says, Prapyavantiin Udayana Katha Kovida Grama Vruddhan Purvodishtam Anusarapurim Shri Vishalam Swalpi Bhute Sucharita Phale Swarginam Gangatanam Sheshaif Punne Hritamiva Bhuvah Kantimat Khandamekam Divah Kantimat Khandamekam. So how was the country of Avanti? The elderly folk who were there in that country, they were conversant with the story of Udayana. So this this tale of Udayana Vatsaraja is one of the most famous tales from ancient India. It was first documented in Brihat Katha, and then it was incorporated into Sanskrit by Somadeva in his Katha Sarit Sagara, and we find the most beautiful representation of it. It has been immortalized by Bhasa in his Swapna Vasavadattam. To give a general background of the story, Udayana was a ruler of a country by name Vatsa, so he is called as Vatsaraja. And there was also another ruler who was ruling the city of Ujjaini. His name was Chandamahasena Pradyota. He had a daughter by name Vasavadatta. And he wanted to give her daughter in marriage to a young prince by name Sanjaya. But then by that time, Vasavadatta dreams of Udayana somehow, and she falls in love with him. And she falls in love with him, and she wants to send out a message to Udayana somehow, and Chandamahasena Pradyota comes to know this, and he somehow gets Udayana to his kingdom, and he holds him captive there. But because of the good offices of his minister, Udayana is freed from there, and he goes with Vasavadatta. He marries her and goes back to his country. That is the story. There are many versions to this. This is one version of the story. And so that is what Kalidasa says. The elderly folk of that village were well acquainted with the story of Udayana Vatsaraja. And he gives a connection to this aspect of Udayana's story. In another verse, in Meghadoota itself, he says, Pradyotasya priya duhitaram Vatsarajotra jahre Haimam tala druma vanamabhut tatra tasyaiva rajnyaha atrodbhrantaha kila nalagirihi stambham utpatya darpat ityagantur anumayati jano yatra bandhun abhignyaha. So he says, the people of the village, they entertain some travelers who come to Ujjaini. They do not know, they don't have any idea of what Ujjaini is. So it is the duty of the native people of the village to help them understand the heritage of their place. So they entertain them with stories of lore. They say that, do you know this place? This is the place where Udayana Vatsaraja, kidnapped or married of Vasavadatta, who was the daughter of Chandamahasena Pradyota. And the garden you see here, which is full of the tala trees, even that garden belonged to the same king. And the place you see here, another place, this was the place where Nalagiri, the elephant of the same king, it caused trouble. It was in a state of rut and freed itself from the pole it was tied, and it caused chaos there. So that is how the native people of Ujjaini entertain others who first come to their city. And coming back to this verse, after having entered the country of Avanti, he says, the Yaksha says, Purvodishtam Anusarapurim Shri Vishalam Vishalam. Enter the city of Ujjaini, and he applies a very beautiful epithet to describe the city of Ujjaini, which is also called Vishala. He calls it Shri Vishala, which is expansive because of its wealth. It is expansive because of its opulence. It had abundant wealth in it. And the effortless Shabdalankara in these two words is also noteworthy. Shri Vishalam Vishalam. And how was the city? Kalidasa says, Swalpi bhute sucharita phale swarginam gamgatanam shesheif punye hritamiva divaha kantimat khandamekam. It was as if a resplendent portion of the heaven itself descended onto the earth. So it is the heaven on earth. That is the city of Ujjaini. But how is this possible? How can we see heaven on earth? Kalidasa gives us a very beautiful reason. It is a general feeling that people ascend to heaven by virtue of their self-acquired religious or spiritual merit. And after having spent a good amount of time there, even their punya, it recedes, so that they have to come back to their initial place, that is the earth. And some people there, their punya count was on an all-time low, and they had to come back. But then they did not want to come back empty-handed. They wanted to bring back something. So by virtue of their remaining punya, they got back a portion of heaven itself, a glowing portion of heaven itself, and landed it down on the earth, and that is the city of Ujjaini. And this is the sort of glowing tribute that Kalidasa assigns to his homeland. And next, from this point onward, the cloud sees the river Shipra, which flows in Ujjaini, and Kalidasa on this occasion describes a gentle breeze that flows on the Shipra river. This is one of the finest verses in Meghadoota. It is a personal favorite of mine. It simultaneously appears to all our 5 sense organs, and it beautifully justifies how I described Kalidasa in the previous days as a poet of Panchendriya Tripti. So let us hear this verse. Dirghi kurvan patumadakalam kujitam sarasanam pratyusheshu sphutita kamala modamaitri kashayah yatra strinam harati surataglana glani manganukulaha shipravatah priyatama iva prarthana chatukaraha. So the breeze that blows above and across the river, that is Shipra, it somehow, Kalidasa describes it as elongating the chirping sounds of cranes. And this is a very astute observation on the part of a poet. We all know that air is one of the prime media of propagation of sound. So at one end of the river, if some cranes make some sound, that noise will be carried to the other end of the river by the air itself. And when a whiff of fresh air gushes in, the very vibrations of the sounds of the cranes are seen to be stretched. The vibrations of the sound themselves are seen to be stretched. And what sort of sound? Patu madakalam. This is a very beautiful phrase. Kalidasa says, the unique and distinct cooing of the cranes that are happily chirping around, they are in such a state of excitement, and they appear to be, they are moving all around. They appear to be intoxicated. And that is about the sound. We really have to imagine this. When we stand on the banks of a river and a whiff of fresh air blows, the sound itself of any sound for that matter, Kalidasa here describes the sound of cranes, but any sound, when we hear it, how can sound be elongated? Does it have any matter? But Kalidasa's Pratibha, gives physical existence even to abstract entities. And that was about sound or Shabda. And in the next line comes Gandha or the scent. Kalidasa says, Sputita Kamala Moda Maitri Kashayah. Again, this is a loaded phrase. Sputita means bloomed, blossomed, or bursting forth immediately. Kamala is the lotus. Amoda is the fragrance. Maitri literally means friendship, but in this context it means coming into contact with. And Kashaya is it is a sharp odor. It is a pungent odor. So, and within this phrase, the words Amoda Maitri is also very beautiful. In Sanskrit language, one of the synonyms of wind is Gandha Bandhu. So, the beauty of Sanskrit language is such that the Namapada or the noun is very closely tied up with the characteristic feature of what the word is trying to describe. So here, the thing is wind, and what is the characteristic feature of the wind? That it carries within it the fragrance or the scent. So it is called as a Gandha Bandhu, the relative or the friend of scent. That is the beauty of Sanskrit language. You can use, and we can come up with many such synonyms of that word, of that wind on by ourselves, and use it appropriately in poetry. So, Sputita Kamala Moda Maitri Kashayah. The breeze was fragrant with an astringent odor of freshly bloomed lotuses that were, also pungent. And not just scent, we also have a subtle reference to also sight, that is rupa over here. We have to imagine this scene here, because he says pratyusheshu sputita kamalaha. During the morning hours, he says, when the golden rays of the sun first emerge and touch the lotuses that are red in color, we get an idea of the sight also. The sun gently touching the lotuses in the early hours of morning. And then comes the aspect of touch or sparsha. The wind is called Anganukulaha in this occasion by Kalidasa. It is because the wind is pleasant or agreeable to the body. And what is it seen doing? It removes the exhaustion of women after they have made love. That is what Kalidasa says. And finally, we have the rasa. Because obviously it is the Shipravata, it is the breeze that is flowing across the river. So since it is a river, there is an irrepressible element of rasa to it. And the poet Kalidasa here, when he pens the last line, he is at one of its heights of imaginative fancies. He calls the breeze Priyatama, he calls it Prarthana Chatukaraha. Priyatama iva Prarthana Chatukaraha. The breeze is like a lover who is speaking to his beloved, who is beseeching his partner in coaxing terms. Maybe it is like a person who is coaxing his beloved in the morning hours to wake up. So all these elements put together, Kalidasa has expressed all this in a single verse. That is the strength of Kalidasa's poetry. And having parted with this Shipra river, the cloud enters Ujjaini, where, as I said before, it is greeted by circles of fumes that are emanated from buildings. So Kalidasa says here, Jalodgirinai rupachita vapuhu kesha samskara dhupaihi bandhu pritya bhavana shikibhihi datta nuttopaharaha harmyeshvasyah kusuma surabhishu advakedam nayethaha lakshmim pashyal lalita vanita pada raga ankiteshu. So in the very fifth verse of Meghadutam, which I explained at the beginning of yesterday's talk, Kalidasa describes the cloud as Dhumajyotis salila marutam sannipataha. So he describes the cloud as the conglomeration of of smoke, of light, of water, and of wind. And he builds on the same idea here and says that the cloud is augmented in its size by taking in the fumes. And it is not any ordinary fume. It is not the smoke that emanates from the cremation yards. It is not that. Kalidasa does not make such a bibhatsa description. The cloud that Kalidasa is describing here is a rasika. And what sort of fumes does it take in? Those that women use to perfume their hair, which escapes from the lattices of the buildings. So, Kesha Samskara Dhupaihi, that is what Kalidasa says. So, the cloud, as soon as it is entering the city, it is greeted by some fumes, and it is taking them in. It is, beautifully fragrant with the perfume that women use for their hair. And there are many such descriptions of even as trivial, as insignificant a thing as smoke or fumes in Sanskrit literature. It is replete with that. To give only one such example, in the first sarga of Ganga Devi's Madhura Vijayam, we see a very beautiful description that is in the evening times. She says, Sandhyasu yatra niryanti jalebhyo dhuparajayaha antah pradipika loka chakita dhvanta sannibhaha. She says, Ganga Devi says, every evening trails of incense would escape out of the windows of that city, as though it was darkness itself running away, frightened at the sight of oil lamps that were lit inside the buildings. So, darkness is an abstract entity. It is given life here. It is running away from something. It is frightened at something. Frightened from what? Frightened at what? Of oil lamps, at the light that is emanating from oil lamps that is lit inside the houses. So we have many such examples of such descriptions in Sanskrit. And Kalidasa continues here. The domestic peacocks in these buildings will be thrilled to see you. The peacocks are described variously as friends of the clouds, because peacocks like rains, and clouds bestow rain upon them, and they will offer you gifts in the form of dance. So, bhavana shikhibihi, bandhu pritya bhavana shikhibihi datta nruttopaharaha. Nrutta is a kind of angika abhinaya. It is some sort of a dance that is full of acrobatic movements of various limbs of the body. And I had mentioned yesterday that Kalidasa describes various forms of peacocks. And this occasion, I feel, is very apt to remember them all. We have already seen one kind of peacocks in the course of this exposition, that is the wild peacocks. Shukla pangai sajala nayanai swagati kritya kekaha. That is one kind of peacocks. Those wild peacocks at the very side of the cloud feel so happy that their eyes fill up with tears. And ashru or tears is a kind of a sattvika vikara. That is an involuntary reaction. It is an impulsive reaction to a happy moment. So when we are deeply moved by something, tears well up in our eyes on its own accord. So the peacocks, the wild peacocks, are so happy. Next, on a different occasion, Kalidasa describes another type of peacocks that is no ordinary peacock. In the context of Devagiri, which the cloud moves onto from this place, he describes the Vahana of Subramanya himself, about which he says, if the wild peacocks, and the peacocks that are domesticated offer gifts in the form of dance, that Vahana of Subramanya does not even move an inch. In fact, the cloud itself has to go in front of it and thunder. And by that peacock will feel happy and dance. And that is also so full of pride that when it dances and a feather from it falls down, Parvati, the Jagannatha herself, picks up the peacock's feather, and because of her love for her son, that is Subramanya, she places it on her ear as an ornament. That is the kind of peacock that is described. And in the description of all three varieties of these peacocks, we see a pattern here. We see a very gradual transition from innocence to some sort of arrogance and pride. The wild peacocks, they were full of tears, as I said. They are very natural and unostentatious. And the peacocks in those buildings in Ujjaini, the domestic peacocks, are not so natural. But however, they offer their dance because of their liking for the cloud as a gift. But then the Vahana of Skanda is so full of pride, it does not do anything. So by this, Kalidasa says, there is this transition in the world of animals itself, birds and animals. A bird like peacock, pride, the position or power can corrupt anyone. That is what Kalidasa is trying to suggest here. So if proximity to people of power like Skanda can corrupt even a peacock, what to say of human beings? That is what Kalidasa is trying to suggest by means of this verse. And coming back to the verse itself, Jalodgirnaihi, he says, as the Yaksha keeps repeatedly mentioning, if you have grown tired, you can rest for a while on the mansions of Ujjaini that are fragrant with sweet-smelling flowers and that are marked by graceful footprints of women caused by the lac which they have applied on their feet. So the women, must have walked all around on the mansions there, and because of the red lac that they have applied on their feet, the whole place is very beautiful with their footprints. So if we consider this whole verse in its entirety, we see that it is structured in a very beautiful manner, which is also unique to Kalidasa. So at one level on the top or in the skies, we see fumes. and we know which fill up the cloud, and in the middle there are dancing peacocks and sweet smelling flowers which are giving out fragrance, and on the ground there are footprints of beautiful women. So the Rachana Shilpa of this verse, which is spread out in so many layers, is extraordinary. So the skill of Kalidasa as a poet, his skill as a veritable wordsmith are very well depicted in this verse, I feel. And then the Yaksha asks the cloud to move on further to the temple of Mahakala, basically, which is there in Ujjaini. And there he tells the cloud, you can see the river Gandhavati, and he says, Punyam Yayas Tribhuvana Guror Dhama Chandishwarasya. He calls Ujjaini as the abode of Chandishwara. Punyam Yayaha. May you will acquire religious merit or punya by seeing that. And later he says, Apyanyasmin Jaladhara Maha Kala Masadya Kale Sthathavyam te Nayana Vishayam Yavadatyeti Bhanuhu Kurvan Sandhya Balipatahatam Shulina Shlaghaniyam Amandranam Phalam Avikalam Lapsyase Garjitanam. This is a very beautiful verse, and Kalidasa here has has devised a very clever plan. Clever because Kalidasa badly wants to describe the temple of Mahakala, for which he has all admiration. But still, he does not want to halt the progress of the cloud for a long time. So he strikes the middle path. Eka kriya dvyarthakari babhuva. Amrascha siktaha pitarascha truptaha. Kalidasa here, he says to the Yaksha, says to the cloud, Apyanyasmin Jaladhara Mahakala Masadya Kale. Not this time around, but sometime in the future, when you happen to come to Ujjaini again, when you happen to visit the temple of Mahakala, don't forget to do all these things. You must make it a point to do all the things that I am going to describe to you, but not now, because you have an assignment to do, but on another time. Come back here, make sure you do all these things, but not now. So this is some clever scheming of Kalidasa. He says, and when you come here some next time, make sure that you stay there till the sun sets. Because when the Sandhya Kala Puja is performed to Mahakala, you may offer your worship by playing as a drum, by virtue of your thunder, by giving out your garjane, so that you will fulfill the objective of your deep thunder. The cloud has been blessed with a very deep thunderous voice, as it were. Amandranam phalam avikalam lapsyase garjitanam. That is what Kalidasa says. You will obtain the fruit of your garjana. And there he also sees, Kalidasa also says, you will see some girls dancing around. They are performing something called as the Daishika Nritya. It is a Deshi variety of dance where girls dance around with swords and chauris in their hands, and in their flags also in their hand, and their feet are covered with anklets which are furnished with tinkling bells, so they are making beautiful tingling noises all time around. And so the Yaksha asks the cloud to entertain those dancers. And why should the cloud entertain those dancers? Only to be a part, only to get to see their side-eyed glances that are long like a row of bees. Kalidasa says, Madhukara Shreni Dirghan Katakshan. And I must make a point here. This allusion of women's eyes to a swarm of bees has been really abused. It has been misused by poets of later periods. But then the aptness, the appropriateness of that allusion can never be overstated. Because, even the glances of women are always tremulous, and so is a swarm of bees. And even the color matches, so there is aptness in that allusion. And next, after having, served as a drum, the cloud has to witness the dance of Shiva, the Nritya of Shiva, by serving as his garment. So Kalidasa pens a verse in this occasion. He says, Paschad uchchair bhujataruvanam mandalen abhilinaha sandhyam tejaha pratinava japa pushpa raktam dadhanaha nrutyarambhe hara pashupatehe ardra nagajinechham shantodvegaha stimita nayanam drushta bhaktir bhavanya. So there is a Puranic story that there once lived a Rakshasa in the form of an elephant, Gajasura, who was causing distress to all the three worlds, and Ishvara or Shiva slayed that Rakshasa, and after he killed that demon, he ripped off the skin of that elephant and used it as his garment. And even while the skin was dripping with the blood of the Rakshasa. So that is the Puranic story. And Kalidasa describes in this verse, he describes Shiva as Uchchair Bhuja Taruvanam. Shiva's multiple arms, how are they? They are strong and mighty, like a forest filled with huge trees. And in the evening, when the cloud that is dark and filled with a red hue, like a freshly bloomed hibiscus flower, Japa Kusuma, when it has to rest on the shoulders of Shiva when he is about to commence dancing. That is the idea that Kalidasa expresses in this verse. Why should the cloud really serve as the garment on Shiva? So that Shiva does not feel like wearing the Gajajina again. Because when Shiva goes into that mode, he becomes the Layakrit. He becomes the destroyer of the entire world. He performs his Tandava Nritya, which is horripilating, which is a horrid sight indeed. And Kalidasa here says, Bhavanyaha Shantodvegaha. Parvati herself was scared initially that she because of the similarity between the cloud and the garment of the elephant. Because of similarity in color, the cloud is also dark colored and the elephant is also of a dark complexion, and also because of the red blood trickling down from the elephant bark. And even here the cloud is also red because it is the evening time, and Kalidasa says it is red like a freshly bloomed Japa Kusuma or the hibiscus flower. So because of these similarities, Parvati is scared. She is scared that Shiva goes into that Tandava Nritya mode again. But Nritya Arambhe, when Shiva starts dancing, if you serve as the garment, he won't have any need for the Gajajina. So the world is saved from his Tandava Nritya. And so that Parvati realizes that it is only a cloud and she is free of fear. And now, after having played its part in the worship of Shiva in the evening during the Tandava Nritya of Shiva, the Yaksha asks the cloud to proceed further in its path. And on the way, during the night, so Kalidasa is progressively moving from one part of the day to another. First we saw Pratyusheshu Sputita Kamala Moda Maitri, that was the morning. Then he said you have to stay there till evening. Now he is coming to the night, where he says, on the way of the cloud, during the night times, you will encounter some women who are moving about on the streets of Ujjaini. They are moving about to meet their beloveds. They are called as Abhisarikas in Sanskrit, and Kalidasa writes a verse about them. He says, Gachantinam Ravanavasatim Yoshitam Tatra Naktam Ruddhaloke Narapatipathe Suchibhedyais Tamobhihi Saudamanya Kanaka Nikashas Snigdhaya Darshayorvim Toyotsargas Tanita Mukharo Masma Bhur Viklavastaha. This is an amazing verse. And the Yaksha says, whenever you see women on the streets who are so eager to be united with their beloveds, please help them in some way. That is the desire of the Yaksha. And those women are moving about in the dead of the night, when there is pitch darkness that is enveloped everywhere, so they are not able to see at all, but still their desire is so intense that they are going there. And Kalidasa, how he describes darkness, he says, Suchi bhedyais tamobhihi. a thing as abstract as darkness, he says it was so dense that it could be pierced with a needle. We have to visualize this. The darkness was so, all encompassing. It had engulfed the space on all directions that it could be actually pierced with a needle. So that, it was as if a solidified wall coming in the front, coming in the way of those abhisarikas moving around, so that they have absolutely no possibility of looking anywhere. So the Yaksha asks the cloud to please help them in some way. What can a cloud do? He says, show them the way, show them at least a portion of their earth, even for a moment, because of the flashes of your lightning, which Kalidasa also says, which are charming like a streak of gold on a touchstone. Kanaka nikasha snigdhaya darshayorvim. So if you shine your lightning, they will be able to see their path even for a moment. By that they will gain some confidence and progress in that path. And here we see that the Yaksha is so compassionate. So, I'm sorry? And also in the fourth line, I was coming to that, the Yaksha is so compassionate about all lovers that he says, you show them the way, you help them in some way, but then don't scare them. He says in the fourth line, Toyotsargas tanita mukharo masma bhuhu viklavaastaha. He says, don't send down a torrential gushing of rains, or even, don't roar your thunder, because they will be scared. They're already scared. They're already so anxious to meet their beloveds. And if you scare them even more, they will be pushed to a pitiable condition. Please don't do that to them. And this description of Abhisarika has inspired like so many verses of Kalidasas. In almost all Subhashita Sangrahas, in almost anthologies of Subhashitas, we have descriptions of Abhisarikas, and in almost all Mahakavyas we have descriptions of Abhisarika. One such beautiful verse is found in the Amarushataka. And the verse goes like this. It is in the form of a conversation. I will explain that after reciting the verse. क्वप्रस्थितासि करभोरुघने निशीथे प्राणाधिपो वसति यत्र जनः प्रियो मे एकाकिनी बत कथं नु बिभेषि बाले नन्वस्ति पुंखितशरो मदनः सहायः. So an Abhisarika, very much like the women of Ujjaini, is seen by a person. So the Abhisarika is moving about in the dead of night. So a person asks her, Kvaprasthitasi karabhoru ghane nishithe. Where are you going in this time of the day? It is all dark. Where are you going? Pranadhipo vasati yatra janah priyo me. I am going to my beloved. I am going to his house. But then the other person asks, aren't you scared? You are all alone. And she says, Nanvasti punkhita sharo madanas sahayaha. I have Manmatha here who has his bow strung. He is acting as my bodyguard. So when he is with me, I have no reason to be scared. This is the kind of description that Sanskrit poets have been able to do, having derived inspiration from Kalidasa. Manmatha, as we all know, is said to have 5 arrows in the form of flowers, and when he has his bow strung and he helps people in love. So, and next, after having done all these activities, the Yaksha asks the cloud to simply take rest for a while. And the reason he gives for that is also very interesting. The Kalidasa says, Tam kasyam chid bhavana valabho sukta paravatayam nitva ratrim chira vilasanat khinna vidyut khalatraha drishte surye punarapi bhavan vahayed advashesham mandayante nakhalu suhradam abhyupet arthakrityaha. Here, so why should the cloud take rest? After all, we saw the Yaksha prompting it along to go swiftly in its direction. But here the Yaksha says, please take rest, because not because you are tired, but because your beloved, the lightning, she is tired. Because she has helped the Abhisarikas to find their way. She has, she has flashed for a long time, and so she would have grown tired. Chiravilasanat khinna vidyut kalatraha, because your beloved is tired, so please take rest along with her. So you retire for the night on the terrace of some buildings, and where you will find pigeons asleep. And when the sun comes out in the morning tomorrow, please proceed further. That is what the Yaksha says. Because he says in the form of an Arthantaranyasa, Mandayante nakulu suhridam abhyupeta artha krityaha. People who have agreed to help a friend, they won't be lackadaisical for a long time. They won't slack around for a long time. They know that they have a mission to accomplish. So, and this Arthantaranyasa is really beautiful because the Yaksha never really orders the cloud around, because he knows that he is the one who is being helped. So it is always the tone of Anunaya, of request, that the Yaksha speaks in those tones to the cloud. And in this verse, we have yet another example of Kalidasa's keen observation of nature. He says, Bhavanavalabhu supta paravatayam. We all know it for a fact that pigeons, that is the paravata, they like residing in elevated positions than most other birds. Kalidasa has observed this, and he has, in the expanse of his poem, space for everything. We saw that he has described crows, now he is describing pigeons. And because the subject is as trivial as a pigeon, he does not go about giving an unrealistic description. Bhavana valabho supta paravatayam. So pigeons are usually grey in color, of a cementish complexion, and so is the cloud. That similarity is also there. So the Kalidasa's poetry, it does not cease to appeal to us. It is suggestive in so many ways. And in the next poem, we see the description of a Khandita Nayika, of a woman as though she is angry. Why she is angry? Is she a woman at all? Is he really describing a woman or something else? We will see in this verse. Kalidasa says, Tasmin kale nayana salilam yoshitam khanditanam shantim neyam pranayibhirato vartva bhanos tyajashu praleyastram kamala vadanat sopi hartum nalinyaha pratyavrittastvai kararudhi syad analpabhyasuyaha. Again, this is a beautiful verse which is set in the morning, during some hours of the morning. So morning is the time usually when I'll first explain the verse and then go into the significance. When men wipe the tears of angry wives. So why are the wives angry at their husbands? Because they have spent the previous night somewhere else, not in the company of their wives, somewhere else with someone else, because of that they are angry, and their eyes are full of angry tears. And the husbands who return home in the morning, the first job that they have to do is wipe off the tears. Even before saying anything else, they have to wipe those tears off, and they are engaged in doing that. Shantim neyam pranayibhirato vartma bhanos tyajashu. So in a similar manner, it is not just people who have angry wives, it is also some things in the nature which are equally reflective of this sentiment. So Kalidasa says, similarly, the sun is also eager to stretch his hand in the form of rays in order to wipe off the tears, that is in the form of dewdrops collected on the leaves of lotuses. So even the sun is eager to please his beloved, that is the lotus. So if the cloud blocks the outstretched arms of the sun in the form of rays, he will be enraged. So the sun is trying to somehow, please his beloved, and if the cloud comes in the way, the sun will obviously be angry. So the Yaksha also gives out a warning to the cloud as to, don't do that. It will prove counterproductive to you. So pratyavrittaha, if you block the sun's path, kararudhi, if you block his rays, syad analpabhyasuyaha. Abhyasuyaha is also a very beautiful word which Kalidasa has used here. So love is not just between people, it can also be seen in nature, And the Yaksha, having himself experienced love, has developed so much of sahanubhuti for all forms of love. For love which can manifest itself in myriad manifold ways. And next, the cloud is asked to go to a place called Devagiri, which is the abode of Skanda or Subramanya. After passing through a river by named Gambhira, and in the very beginning of the poem, Kalidasa describes the cloud as Kamarupi, as someone with the power to assume any form at will. Here, when it goes to the city, the place of Subramanya, that is the Devagiri, the Yaksha asks the cloud to assume the form of flowers as a heap of flowers, and send down flowers that are drenched with the waters of the celestial Ganga, of Deva Ganga, on Skanda. That is what Kalidasa says. Tatra skandam niyatavasatim pushpa meghi kritatma pushpasare snapayatu bhavan vyoma ganga jalartraihi. So you perform the abhisheka, you bathe Skanda by your flowers, which are also wet on account of they being purified by the waters of the divine Ganga. So Ganga, as we all know, is called Tripadhaka, the river which flows in three ways. And so since the cloud is floating in the sky, it has very easy access to the divine Ganga. And so what is Skanda like? What is Subramanya like? He is the commander-in-chief of Indra's army, and he killed the demon by name of Taraka. He killed the Tarakasura. And over here, we see the description of Skanda's peacock, which I mentioned some time ago. And while explaining the verse, Chalodgirne Rupachita Vapuhu. So let's have a look at that verse. Kalidasa says, while describing the peacock of Skanda, Jyotirlekha valayi galitam yasya barham bhavani putra premna kuvalayadala prapi karne karoti dhautapangam hara shashirucha pavakes tammayuram paschad adrigrahana gurubhihi garjitair nartayethaha. So, as I said before, you have to give sound to your thunder at Devagiri, and the place Devagiri is a mountain, and when the cloud roars, its thunder will be stretched, as it were, on account of it being echoed from the mountains. Kalidasa says here, Adrigrahana Gurubhihi, on account of the echo, and that will make that sound of the thunder will make the peacock dance. And how is the peacock? Its eyes are as if cleansed, as if aglow with the luster of the moon on Shiva's head. Kalidasa says, Hara Shashirucha Pavakehe Tam Mayuram. And I explained this before. So that will make the peacock dance, and when it dances, if a feather at all falls down, Parvati picks up that feather, and Putra Premna, due to her love for her son, that is Subramanya, she uses it as an ornament in the place of a blue lily which was there, which she usually uses as her ear ornament. So she replaces something which is already there with a peacock feather. So even our gods and goddesses are described as having flowers as their ornaments. Flowers or things such as peacock feathers as their ornaments. Then from that place, Kalidasa says, you don't be scared that some siddhas will encounter you on the way, and don't be scared that they will block your path. They won't, because Kalidasa says they are scared that they always carry a veena with them, and you, on account of your showers, when water comes in contact with the strings of the veena, that will spoil the instrument. So they are scared because of that. So they won't block your way in any manner. So you don't have any such fear, and you are able to move forward freely. he says, Siddhadvandvair Jalakana Bhayad Vinibhihi Mukta Margaha. So you have the path all for yourself. You can progress with all confidence. And the cloud will then reach a river by name Charmanvati. And there, even before reaching that river, it is the modern Chambal. Kalidasa says, Aradhyainam Sharavana-bhavam Devamullangitadhva Siddhadvandvaihi Jalakana Bhayad Vinibhir Mukta Margaha Vyalambethaha Surabhitanaya Lambhajam Manayishyan Sroto Murtya Bhuvi Paranatam Ranti Devasya Kirtim. So, there once lived a king by name Rantideva, who was the emperor of Dashapura. He had performed a sacrifice by name the Gavalambha Yajna, and he was in the lineage of Bharata. He was sixth in the lineage of Bharata. So you pay your respects to that heritage of Rantideva, and he himself he appears on the earth in the form of a river as Charmanvati, the Rantideva. You pay your respects to him, and then he goes on to describe the river, that is Charmanvati. So I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. So the Rantidevasya Kirtim, correct. So Parinatam Rantidevasya Kirtim, the sacrifice or the yajna that he performed, the Gavalambha Yajna, the waters that he used for the sake of that ritual, that those waters have taken the form of a river, of a whole river. So the water that is used as a part of the sacrifice, they can form a whole river that is called Charmanvati. And he goes on to describe the river itself, Charmanvati, and even this verse is very beautiful, one of the best verses in Meghadoota. Tvayadatum jalam avanate sharngino varnachore tasya sindhoho pruthumapi tanum durabhavat pravaham prekshishyante gaganagatayaha nunam avarjya drishtihi ekam mukta ganamiva bhuvaha sthula madhyendra neelam. Amazing verse. So it is again an aerial view, a view from the top, as we saw yesterday. So Gagana Gatayaha, people from above who are looking down, they will see the river Charmanvati, though it is, though the river is itself large, because of the distance from the earth to the sky, it appears only as a single-lined thin stream for people who look upon from the skies. So, Pruthumapi Tanum Dura Bhavat Pravaham. The Pravaha of the river, Dura Bhavat, on account of the distance, is looking Pruthu, Tasya Sindho Tanum. That is, it is appearing as a thin stream. And the Yaksha tells the cloud, when you bend down to drink water from this river, how will it appear? So, from the top, for a person who is looking down, the river, as I said, is a thin stream, and it is likened to a pearl necklace. And when the cloud, bends down to drink water, it is as if the earth itself is ornamented with a pearl necklace with a beautiful blue sapphire in the middle. That is the description of Kalidasa. And he says, Sharngino Varnachore. You have, stolen the color of our Krishna. Krishna is dark in color, and so are you. And there is also a beautiful suggestion here that the sapphire which is there in the middle of the pearl necklace, which decorates the earth itself, that blue sapphire is Krishna himself. So the Krishna is called the jewel on earth, the ornament of the earth. That is the suggestion of this verse. And moving forward, he says, and Tam Uttirya, after having crossed this Charmanvati river, Vraja Parichita Bhrulata Vibhramanam Pakshmot Kshepat Patu Parilavas Krishna Shara Prabhanam Kundakshepanugama Madhukara Shrimusham Atmabimbam Patri Kurvan Dashapuravadhu Netra Kautuhalanam. So the cloud is asked to move forward to a place called Dashapura from the river Charmanvati, where he says, Parichita Bhrulata Vibhramanam. The women of Dashapura, they are acquainted with sporting movements of the eyebrows. Here, this is also a unique thing about Kalidasa. He describes various types of women. He describes various types of movements of eyebrows of women. And by account of that, he gives an idea of the samskara, that the background of the women. First we see the Pathika Vanitaha. We saw it on the first day. Tvamarudham Pavanapadavim Udgrihita Alakantaha Prekshishyante Pathika Vanitaha Pratyayad Ashvasantyaha. So those women there, Pathika Vanitaha, they are innocent. And we have another type of women, the Siddhanganas. Adre Shringam Harati Pavanah Kimsvedi Tyunmukhi. So we have another type of women, Mugdha Siddhanganabihi, the innocent Siddha women. Then there is another type of women, that is the Janapada Vadhus, that is, forest dwellers, wives of forest dwellers, or country women. And Tvayayattam Krishiphalamiti Bhruvilasa Anabhijnaihi. Those people, the country women there, all they know that the produce of agriculture is entirely dependent on the cloud. So they are full of gratitude and look upon the cloud with gratitude. There he says, Bhruvilasa Anabhijnaihi. They do not know any sportive movements of their eyebrows. But here he says, the women of Dashapura, Parichita Bhrulata Vibhramanam. And so many types of women are described in Meghadoota. There are the Vanachara Vadhus, there are the Panyastris, there are the Pushpalavis, or the people who collect flowers on tops of mountains. And there are the Pauranganas of Ujjaini, where Kalidasa says, Lola Pangair Yadina Ramase Lochanair Vanchitosi. And exactly, the thing which we saw just now, there are the Veshyas, there are the Abhisarikas, which we also saw today. And finally, there are the Dashapara Vadhus, Parichita Bhrulata Vibhramanam. And you make your form in a form that is conducive as to become the object of curiosity for those women. That is the instruction given by Yaksha to the cloud. And to those eyes of the ladies of Dashapura, which are well acquainted with the sportive movements of the eyebrows, and which rival with the beauty of the bees following the kunda flowers or the jasmine flowers as they are tossed about. So when jasmine flowers are tossed about and bees are following them in order to suck the nectar, those are like, these movements of the eyebrows of those women are so ficklish, they are so dynamic, that they resemble a swarm of bees in motion following the a heap of flowers. That is the sort of description that Kalidasa has to make. And then from that point, the cloud is asked to go to the land of Brahmavarta, where the Yaksha says, Brahmavartam janapadam athat chayaya gahamanaha kshetram ksatra pradhana pishunam kauravam tad bhajethaha Rajanyanam shita shara shataihi yatra gandiva dhanva dharapatais tvamiva kamalani abhyavarshan mukhani. This is what Kalidasa has to say about the land of Brahmavarta. You go to that land, and how should you enter that country? By respect of your shadow. So as all of us know, when a cloud moves in the sky, that shadow is what travels on the earth. So the cloud can really enter the land of Brahmavarta by means of its shadow. Janapadamatat chayaya gahamanaha. You submerge the entire land by means of your shadow. Kshetram, that land, ksatra pradhana pishunam, kauravam tad bhajethaha. You have to go to that land. Rajanyanam shita shara shataihi, yatra gandiva dhanva, where Arjuna, he used a shower of arrows to kill his enemies, that the Kauravas, much like you who send down a shower of rain. as you do to a lotus, that is how Arjuna himself did to his enemies. Shita Shara Shataihi. The phrases that Kalidasa uses in this context are very beautiful and full of Shabda Alankara. Shita Shara Shataihi. Shita is sharp, Shara is arrow, Shataihi, hundreds in number. Shita Shara Shataihi. And in the previous line he says, Kshatra Pradhana Pishunam. Pradhana is the war. Pradhanam Pravidaranam is the war. And Kshatra Pradhana Pishunam. It is Pishuna. It is as if it is always talking about the glories of Kshatriyas. The land is such that, and you have to go to that land where the land of Kurukshetra, where the great battle of Pandavas and Kauravas took place. You have to go to that land, and following which you have to approach the river Saraswati. There he makes a reference to Balarama, who undertook a Tirtha Yatra because he did not want to participate in the Mahabharata war, which is not a great act in any way. But he undergoes a Tirtha Yatra in the whole course of the Saraswati river. And there he says, Krutva tasam adhigatam apam saumya saraswatinam antashuddhaha tvamapi bhavita varnamatrena krishnaha. So, if you go and visit that Saraswati river, on account of her punya, you yourself will be purified. On the inside, you will be purified, and on the outside, you will retain your complexion of your dark complexion. So, you will be purified internally and also, for all time to come, and you will remain black only in color. That is what Kalidasa says. You will become Shuddha by meeting with the divine river, that is Saraswati. And this is also important because the river Saraswati is one of the major rivers of India. And it is also historically important because it helps to reconstruct the history of ancient India. The river Saraswati is eulogized in many ways, starting from the time of Rigveda itself. We have many hymns eulogizing the glory of Saraswati. We have the Saraswati Sukta itself. Yamadada Dhravasamranachutam divo dasam yadrashva yadashushe. That is how the Saraswati hymn goes. And even in Raghuvamsha, Kalidasa makes a mention of the river Saraswati. So Kalidasa's works are replete with so many historical details such as this, which will help us reconstruct the history of ancient India. And from the Saraswati river, the cloud is asked to go to the river Ganga. Tasmad gacchehe anukanakhalam shaila rajavatirnam janhoh kanyam sagaratanaya swarga sopana panktim Gauri Vaktra Bhrukuti Rachanam Ya Vihasyeva Phenaihi Shambhoh Kesha Grahana Makaro Dindu Lagnormi Hasta. So, how is the river Ganga? There is, all of us know, there is eternal rivalry between Ganga and Parvati because both are wives of Shiva. So, the Ganga is almost taking a dig at Parvati by her waves. Penaihi, by the foam that is on the waves of the river. She Vihasyeva Parvati. She is as though laughing at Parvati. And Gauri Vaktra Bhrukuti Rachana Ya Vihasyeva Penaihi. She is causing the anger of Parvati. So Parvati is knitting her eyebrows on looking at Ganga. Janhoh Kanyam Sagaratanaya Swarga Sopana Panktim. So how is Ganga? It is like a flight of stairs for the ancestors of Sagara to ascend to heaven. That is based on the Puranic story. That is how Kalidasa describes. Tasmad Gachehe Anukana Kalam Shaila Rajavatirinam, the daughter of the Himalayas, Ganga. You go to this place called Kanakhala, that is near Haridwara, and where the Ganga descends into the Himalayas, into India, that is. The cloud has to go to that place. And Shambhoh Kesha Grahana Makaro Dindu Lagnormi Hasta. That Ganga is, Indu Lagnormi Hasta. By her waves, she is as though snatching the moon that is there on Shiva's head, again to irritate Parvati. So we have various accounts of such verses here. One of the verses, so she's pulling Shiva to herself. She wants Shiva to be separated from Parvati. She is, with her waves, she is pulling Shiva by the locks, by his hair, to herself. So that is how Kalidasa describes. And in another verse, I don't remember the entire verse. Indor Lekham Vikrishya, Parvati, in a moment of happiness, in an intimate moment with Shiva, she is said to, take out the moonbeam and keep it on her own head and ask Shiva if she looks beautiful. That is another verse. And this is really, beautiful because we know Shiva as Ardhanarishvara. And, Parvati taking the moon from one part of her body and transporting it to another part of her own head. It looks like that, but still they have their moment of intimacy and fun. That is the Adi Dampati themselves, Shiva and Parvati. And next, the cloud is asked to move forward and drink from the waters of Ganga. Tasyah patum suragaja iva vyomni paschardhalambi त्वं चेत् अच्छस्फटिक विशदं तर्कये स्थिर्यगम्भः संसर्पन्त्या सपदि भवतः स्रोतिसि छाययासौ स्यादस्थानोपगत यमुना संगमेवाभिरामा. When the cloud is drinking the waters from the rivers of the Ganga, which is achchaspatika vishadam, which is very clear, like like crystals. Achchaspatika vishadam. It is so much clear and transparent. When you drink from those waters, it is as though the confluence of Ganga and Yamuna is happening at a different place. Because the Yamuna river is dark complexion and the cloud itself is also dark complexion, and the Ganga here is said to be very transparent, so it is white in color. So when the cloud and the river get together, even for a moment, it looks as though there is the confluence, the Sangama of Ganga and Yamuna that all of us will get to see. Suragaja Iva, that is like the Diggaja, or you will look like that. And from that, so we have entered into the land of Himalayas, where he says, Asinanam surabhita shilam nabhigandeir mruganam. So the land of Himalayas are filled with so many rocks and stones, and those stones, by account of what punya we don't know, that they have emerged from in whichever janma in their previous births, are fragrant because of deers which sit on those rocks, and musk deers, those give out fragrance from their navels. So when the deer sit there and move around, they leave behind their fragrance. So those stones of the Himalayas are filled with those fragrance. Tasya eva prabhava machalam prapya gauram tusharehi vakshat yadvashrama vinayane tasya shringe nishannaha shobham shubhrat trinayana vrishot khata pankopameyam. So when you go there, you will, on account of removal of all your fatigue, you will possess a beauty that is comparable to a mass of mud that is turned up by the Vrisha, that is the bull of Shiva himself, by the god, that is Trinayana, that is Shiva. So, it may be Shiva's own Vahana. It will have its own activities to do. So, in a moment of fun, it might have dug up, the mud in the Himalayas, and the cloud is likened to that beauty. So, the real aspect here is that though the object of comparison might be mud, but on account of Shiva's Vahana digging it up, there is a certain pavakatva to it, and the cloud is likened with that. And the Yaksha continues, he says, Tanchedvayu sarati saralaskandha sanghatta janma badhe tolka kshapita chamari bala maro davagnihi arhasyenam shamayitumalam varidhara sahasraihi apannartik prashamana phala sampado hyuttamanam. This verse is filled with an arthantaranyasa in the fourth line. He says, Vayo Sarati, as the wind moves about in the forest there, the Sarala trees, the Sarala Vrikshas, Sarala Sanghatta Janma Davagnihi, the forest fire which emerges as the result of friction between Sarala trees, that forest fire may set the tails of Chamari Mrigas on fire. So Chamari Mrigas are said to frequent the slopes of Himalayas, the peaks of Himalayas. So as they are moving about there, their tails might catch fire. So that is not a good thing to happen. So the Yaksha is asking the cloud here to pour down rains and help the Chamari Mrigas to come out of their distress. Arhasi enam shamayitu malam vari dhara sahasraihi. So please help them. Why? Because Kalidasa pens an arthantaranyasa. Apannarti prashamana phala sampado hyuttamanam. The wealth of the people, of good people, are there only to help people in distress. So, uttamanam sampadaha apannarti prashamana phalaha. So, the very objective of the strengths or the wealth that the good people possess, how do they find fulfillment? By helping those who are in distress. So Kalidasa gives voice to universal truths like this by means of Arthantaranyasa at various positions in the Meghadoota. And on its way, the cloud will also encounter some mythical creatures such as the Sharabha. And after that, the cloud has the punya to see a footprint of Shiva himself in the Himalayas. The poet says, Tatra vyaktam drushadi charanan nyasa mardhendu maulehe shashvat siddhei rupachita balim bhaktinamrah pariyaha. Bhaktinamraha is such a beautiful phrase. Bowed down because of devotion, because of bhakti. Yasmin drishte karana vigama durdva uddhuta papaha kalpishyante sthira ganapada praptaye shraddhadanaha. So in your way, you will come across a footprint of Shiva himself, Charanan Nyasam Ardhendu Mole Drishadi. On a certain stone, Shiva, when he is passing by, has stepped on that stone, and there is the footprint there for all people to see. It is Vyaktam, it is very clearly visible. Shashvat Siddhaihi, and it is frequented by Siddhas, by people, Munis, or people who are doing all sorts of sadhanas on the Himalayas. They come there to offer their worship, that is Balim. Bhakti Namrah Pariyaha. You have to circumambulate that. You have to, offer a pradakshina there. Bhakti Namraha. You have to be full of bhakti. Yasmin drishte karana vigama duram uddhuta papaha. Just by seeing that, all papas of all people accumulated from because of whatever reasons, they will be vanished just by looking at that footprint of Shiva. Kalpishyante sthira ganapada praptaye shraddhadhanaha. So people who believe this will be freed from all the bondages of life, and they will attain Brahma Sayujya itself. So this is another added advantage for the cloud to make its journey. As I said before, even before reaching the Yaksha's wife, it can have so many benefits on its way. What can be a greater benefit than a sight of Mahadeva himself? So the Yaksha almost incentivizes. He gives an incentive to the cloud to make the journey, and it can drink deep from various rivers and stop on mountains, etc. And Shabdayante madhuram anilaihi kichakaah puryamanaha samsaktabhis vijayo giyate kinnairibhihi nirhradaste muraja iva chet kandareshu dhvanisyat sangeetartho nanu pashupatehe tatra bhavi samagraha. So here, just like the cloud played as the drum during the dance of Shiva in Ujjaini, here again it is getting to play a similar part. Shabdayante madhuram anilaihi kichakaah puryamanaha. So kichakas, that is bamboos that are hollow, one variety of bamboos when wind passes through them, they give out very beautiful sounds. In fact, these are the variety of bamboos from which flutes are made. And Kalidasa uses this idea repeatedly in all his works. It is there in Raghuvamsha, and it is also there in his work that is Kumarasambhava. In the second sarga of Raghuvamsha and in the first sarga of Kumarasambhava. In Kumarasambhava he says, Yafpurayan Kichakarandhra Bhagam Dari Mukothena Samiranena Udgasyatam Ichhati Kinnaranam Tanapradaitva Mivopa Gantum. So even there he is making a reference to Kinnaris, and even in Raghuvamsha, Kujadbhir Apadita Vamsha Krityam. So the exploits of the various kings belonging to the lineage of Raghus were being sounded by in those. In Raghuvamsha he says, Saki Chakair Maruta Purna Randhrihi. By those bamboos which are filled with wind, Kuchadbhir Apadita Vamsha Krityam. So the sound which emerges as a result of wind moving into the bamboos, it is as if eulogizing the exploits of the kings of the lineage of Raghus. And Shushrava Kunjeshu Yashasva Muchaihi Udgiyamanam Vanadevatabhihi. So the fame of the kings of the Raghu dynasty were being eulogized in various ways. Even here, Kalidasa uses a similar idea. So this is again a very characteristic feature of Kalidasa. If he finds something to be of value, he uses it in multiple works of his. So we see this idea used in 3 works. Samsaktabhihi Tripura Vijayaha Giyate Kinnaribhihi. So the Kinnaris who are moving around in the Himalayas, they are singing. And what are they singing? That Tripura Vijaya, how Shiva won over the 3 worlds, Tripura Vijaya, Nirhradaste Muraja Iva. Again you get to play the drum. Kandareshu Dhvanisyat. Sangeetartho nanu pashupatehe tatra bhavi samagraha. So the ensemble of Shiva's Sangeeta party missed one instrument, missed one percussion instrument till this time, and you get to play that role. So tatra bhavi samagraha. When you go there, Shiva's ensemble will be complete. That is how he says. And moving forward, we will have various descriptions of Trivikrama and he says, Kalidasa describes Himalaya in a very sublime fashion in one of the verses. Rashi bhutaf pratidinamivat trembakasyattahasaha. So the white color of the snow in the Himalayas, the collective heap of that, is likened to the laughter of Shiva himself that is accumulated in the form of snow there. So it is a poetic convention in Sanskrit that laughter is fashioned to be white in color. And it is Shiva's laughter because Himalayas is the abode of Shiva. Attahasaha, attam hasati. He, gives out a, maddened laughter. Shiva is said to be the greatest of yogis. He is said to be a Jivan Mukta himself. So it is almost like a Jivan Mukta laughing at the world, laughing at the travels experienced by people at the worlds. So Shiva's Udasinata, which is expressed in the form of that Attahasa, that is collected in the form of snow, that manifests itself in the form of snow, pratidinamiva. So Shiva's daily business is to go about laughing at the world. Why are these people experiencing all sorts of sorrows? That must be Shiva's idea. So that is how Kalidasa describes the Himalayas, and we will see all this and even the Uttara Megha in tomorrow's session. Thank you.